What if I told you that most companies are chasing a mythical creature when they hire something that doesn't actually exist? And what if that obsession is costing them the best talent they'll ever meet? I'm Ryan Kohler, and this is Talent Talks. Emily Alvarez, head of success at AI for Teams, recently sat down with Mike Lejeune, president of Lighting the Path and author of the brand new book Secrets for Hiring Right, who just dropped a story that's going to change how you think about talent forever. Picture this. You're at the Kentucky Derby horse sales, and out walks this champion thoroughbred chest up, head raised, walking like he owns the place. That horse sold for $4 million, won the Kentucky Derby, and got sold to Japan for the highest price ever paid. That's the Versace Pegasus. And Mike says that's exactly what we should be looking for in hiring. But here's where it gets wild. Mike's got 25 plus years in executive search. And he's discovered that we're not just biased about race or gender. We've got horn bias, halo bias, and a dozen other unconscious filters that are making us hire all wrong. So here's what Emily and Mike dive into. Why culture isn't what the leader thinks it's, how the people actually behave. The difference between job descriptions and job postings as magnets. And why AI can crunch 1 billion data points but still can't tell you if someone has resilience. If you've ever wondered why great candidates slip through your fingers while mediocre ones keep getting hired, this conversation is about to blow your mind. Let's dive in.
Thank you for joining us on another episode of Talent Talks. I'm joined today with Mike Lejeune. He is the president and founder of Lighting the Path. I'm really excited to talk with Mike today because he holds a specialty that is very near and dear to my heart, which is secrets of hiring and recruiting. Mike just wrote a book called Secrets for Hiring Right, which just came out. I've read it and it's fantastic. So Mike, welcome to the show. Thanks so much for being here this morning.
Oh, Emily, it's an honor. I've enjoyed our conversations we've had on your path of being an AI expert, but how do you humanize it?
How do you even is that? And how what's an AI expert at this point in time, right? It's changing so fast. I'm like, I don't even know. But we try and making AI human first because that's, the most important thing. But yeah, AI and hiring, and we'll get into that a little bit. But I think with the topic of this podcast really getting into hiring, right? We're getting into some kind of interesting waters in the recruitment world right now, as far as how HR is handling retention, how they're handling hiring in the first place, and how that ties into company culture. And so you have a really great story that you told me that is a great segue into talking about hiring and like the myth of the perfect hiring candidate. You had an experience at the Kentucky Derby many years ago with a champion horse. And so tell us the story of your interaction with Versace Pegasus, because this
Sure.
is an awesome story.
Yeah, I think when you talk about the perfect candidate,
Yeah,
the challenge we run into is that what we want is not the perfect candidate. What we're looking for is the candidate that we can invite in our organization that has exceptional talent. The
yes,
question is, how do you vet it out?
right.
The reason you bring this up is that my father started our family down this journey of getting involved in the horse racing industry. And so coming out of South Louisiana, we had some thoroughbreds that we ran for a while. But my brother and I decided to take my father to Keeneland to the horse sales. And these are horses that are being sold that eventually can end up in the Kentucky Derby probably someday.
Right.
Some of them will. Well, we spent hours watching these horses parade going into the sales arena because we didn't have the deep pockets to get into the sales arena. So we stood
Sure.
outside the door. And my brother, just before the sale was ending for the night, he elbowed me in the ribs and he looked and says, "Get ready." I said, "What? Watch this." And there's a walkway that led into the paddock, the area where the horses were kept. And all
Right.
of a sudden, a horse comes out and he comes out and he turns and points toward the sales arena. And when he made the turn, all of a sudden, his chest stood up, right? His head raised. And when he walked, it's kind of like he's walking down this walkway with this presence about himself that goes, I know that I am the show topper.
Yep.
I know that I'm the best of the best. And he literally walked right in, and you could feel this presence of this animal that was amazing.
Yeah.
And he ended up selling that day for $4 million.
Oh my gosh.
Right. Now, he went on to win the Kentucky Derby a couple of years later and then was sold as a syndicate, and the highest price was ever paid at that time. A Japanese consortium bought him, sent him out to Japan for the breeding industry for thoroughbreds.
Right.
But what you look at this is that what we're looking for from a hiring, we're looking for the Versace Pegasus of the world. That's what we're
Right.
trying to find.
Right.
And it's not somebody who is just has a great pedigree, is because there were a lot of horses that had good pedigrees like he did. The
Right.
difference was he lived up to his pedigree.
Sure.
And that's what hiring right is all about.
Right. I love that. And I think that story is so great because I grew up around Arabians. And so I know what you're talking about when they get that, like, they know how attractive and beautiful they are when they are that prestigious. It's so funny. But you're right. I think leaders a lot of times confuse pedigree with potential.
Mhm.
Right. I used to have a saying that in hiring, I really don't care if someone comes from Park Avenue or Park Bench
I
because
like
I've
that.
known geniuses from both, and I've known phenomenal workers from both, and I've known people like that have been amazing from both, right? It really, and everything in between, really. And so hiring for pedigree, and I, not to sound like a person's a dog, like a pedigree, but a pedigree, a lot of times can actually be a hindrance in some cases. Because if you hire someone that might go to a prestigious school or something like that, not to discredit their experience or their education, but sometimes people in those situations come into an organization and think they know everything
Hmm.
because they did go to a big, expensive school and then they become relatively unteachable. And that to me is when a person is no longer employable anymore, is when they become unteachable for me personally.
Hmm.
If I can't bring you up to scale with everybody else, then we're going to have a problem, especially if you're resistant to that. Um, so talk to me a little bit about what keeps companies, in your opinion, from finding their Versace Pegasus. What is, let's dig into that a little bit. What do you think are some of the things that traditionally, because mine is a purple Sasquatch and a pink bow. I just don't think the perfect candidate ever exists. That's just
Hmm.
me. But
Well, I think
um,
we have to look at the challenge we run into is we develop the mindset of the perfect candidate.
right,
It has to do with what's our focus. When you say what stops people from being selective, I've got over 25 years in executive search. That's how I started down this journey.
right,
And so I worked with everywhere from Fortune 100 companies down to entrepreneurial businesses, watching the hiring process take place. And the mistake I observed over a period of time was that would be made sometimes was the focus on what we call the job description. All right, I need to put a job description together, which is a valuable tool internally from an operational standpoint. But if you're looking for somebody and you're trying to determine what skills do they need to bring in, what academic background do they need to bring in, that's really like question number 3 or 4. The
sure,
first question has to be, what problem am I trying to solve? What issue am I going to ask somebody to come in and address? And then what's the skill somebody might need to do that? What's the mindset somebody might need to have in order to do that? And so if somebody doesn't spend time really honing that down and said, I just need to hire an accountant. Well, an accountant, well, okay, I want a degree. Well, I need a good GPA. I'd like to have them come from a good school. Well, the challenge you run into is that you brought up, somebody comes from an Ivy League school, and that to get into an Ivy League school, well, you're going to have some chops, right?
right,
That's a generalization. The question
absolutely,
becomes, what did somebody do in order to get into the Ivy League school? right? In other words, like the number one quality that's based upon success, based upon proposal, the number one is resilience,
Yes.
the resilience factor. And so what happens is when somebody has not had to struggle to accomplish whatever it is, um, then what happens is that then their ability to come in and bring what you and I were talking about earlier, the work ethic that's required to come in and be a contributor. Number
Right.
two, you have to have resilience factor, and the second is emotional intelligence,
Absolutely.
right? And because again, it's the book, you can see it over my shoulder, Equip to Lead, that I wrote was based upon the definition of EQ, and I have two definitions. One is, do I react or do I respond effectively? But
Right.
the second one, I think, falls in line with what you're talking about. It's, can I look at things through the eyes of someone else? And
Yes.
the studies have shown that 85% of somebody's success in their career is directly uh, proportional to their EQ level, not their IQ level. That only 15% of our success in life is based upon intelligence and experience. It's 85% on the behavioral interaction that I have with other people. And how do I respond to life?
Yeah, and that makes a lot of sense because EQ to me, or being able to put yourself in someone else's shoes, is really empathy.
Hmm.
And empathy allows us to define a pain, right? If we're able to define pain or define a problem, let's just take pain, but define a problem set or define whatever the issue is and then present solution to that. Be resilient through those turbulent times or those times where there are conflict, because we know this in business. A lot of business is solving problems.
Hmm.
A lot of business is solving pain points,
Yeah. But at
whether
the end of the day,
that's,
I think, Emily, all
yeah,
businesses. I mean, in other
right,
words, if you're not
1000%.
solving a problem,
Right,
then I tell people is that if the reason I get engaged is because somebody has a problem they've got to deal with, and that's why they
right,
bring me in to help with that. Nobody
right,
has ever called me and said, Mike, I don't have any problems. But my God, I think I should hire you to do something for me.
right. That is very true. I just wanted to hang out, so I'll just hire
Yeah,
you.
come on. Yeah,
Yeah,
enjoy
I
your
mean, it'd
company.
be nice, but yeah, I mean, most of the time we're there to do a job. We're there to perform a service that
Hmm.
is in response to a layout of things that need to get done to solve for a set of problems or a set of things that need to be handled. And we have to be solution oriented through those things, and at the same time, we know that there's always going to be problems. So that's where the resilience comes in. Can you stand up to these things as they come? Because they will come in waves. They
Hmm.
will come in sets of waves. I'm a surfer, so you sit out there and you get sets, and then you might sit
Hmm.
out there and you get nothing for a while, and then all of a sudden you'll get sets come in. That's kind of like business. It comes in sets, and you have your lulls once in a while, but then you take that time, if you're smart, in my opinion, to look in your blind spots to figure out where things are coming up. Hiring, kind of similarly, if you're, at a point with hiring where you're at a lull, that's great. Go back in and look at some of your practices and say, okay, where can I make improvements to some of the things we're doing? Can I write better job descriptions? Can I write better employee handbooks that cover things better so people know what their expectations are? It doesn't just ever stop.
No, and the reason for those laws you described, Emily, has to do with that's the time that we can sharpen our and increase our ability to be better magnets
Yes.
to attract. And I think
Yes.
that's what I found um, is I used to work with companies when I was running my executive search company to help them reduce turnover. Right. And I had my friends who were in the recruiting business. Why are you doing that? Because I mean, you want turnover because with turnover, there's more jobs to fill. And I tell them, no, the reason I
Oh,
don't is the clients I work with, I don't want them to have turnover. And the reason for that is because they're better magnets. It's easier for me to serve them because they're tracked in today's marketplace. Uh, of where we deal with, depending upon whenever you're watching or listening to this discussion, unemployment's running nationally plus or minus about 4% or so.
Right.
And what happens is in this marketplace, it's extremely competitive at
Yes.
4%. And when it was at 3%, it was ridiculously competitive.
And it's gonna go
And,
up.
and prior to COVID, we saw unemployment in some parts of the country that were in the 1.9, 1.8. It's like the selection I saw companies doing with, I called it the mirror test. Hold the mirror up to somebody and go, did it fog up? Let's hire that one.
Right.
Because it was so hard to find out.
1000%. Throw bodies at it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But in today's time, what happens is we have to recognize that we are competing. We're competing to attract the attention of the top performers.
Yes.
Right. And where a lot of that comes from is one of the greatest misnomers I think that was ever laid, and you still see it talked about, is the Great Resignation. Then when COVID came in, it's a great resignation. The image that I saw happening was that everybody was quitting and moving to California to sit in the mountains and do yoga, resigning.
Right.
And what I realized is that at that time, what I saw happening was the Great Reset. It was
Right.
just people were resetting and saying, I don't, it's like, I don't like my job. Before I call them workarounds. I do a
Yeah, yeah.
workaround. Okay.
Right.
I don't like my boss.
Mhm.
Yeah, but I got a good job, so I'll do a workaround. I don't like as far as it takes me to drive. I do a workaround. COVID came around and everybody goes, what do I want? Okay, what am I going to do? I'm going to reset. And what I find fascinating is in today's time, now that we are 5 years past that, the Great Reset is still going on. It's actually
Still going on.
intensifying.
Yes.
It's
It's
and that's why
still.
the engagement, Sherman and Gallup puts out an engagement survey every year, and they're showing today that the engagement factor is actually lower than it was even in the heart of COVID. Is that the amount of people who are disengaged from the culture of the company and the jobs that they're in is exceeds 50%. And so because of that, when you talk about hiring, the great news is that if we build better magnets that attracts the top performers as far as opportunity, and I was having this conversation with somebody the other day that at one point in time it was very, and you'll love this from a technology space, all right, is at one point in time culture was, do you have a foosball table in your lobby? Do you bring
Yep.
wine in on Fridays?
Yep.
It was these, and that's not culture.
No.
And in today's time, if we're trying to put that type of together, with people as they want to make today, people want to make a difference.
Yes.
The better performers, the Versace Pegasus of the world, want to make a difference, right?
Yes.
And what are you going to do to help me feel a sense of value as a contributor to make a difference? And I think that's what's needed in today's time, is from a mindset of a leader who's trying to build their teams.
Yeah. And it's very, and I love that. And it's so interesting that you are saying this because I have a 20 almost 21-year-old daughter, and I just had this conversation with her the other day about cultures in companies, because her dad owns a company, and I work in a company that we work very closely together and developing. It's a startup, so it's like everybody is all hands on deck at all times. And so um we believe obviously that more of a recruitment marketing type of a mindset, where to what you're saying, we market to the candidate, right? We treat it just like if we're marketing to a customer, because at the end of the day, there is a direct correlation between how your customer experience is and how your hiring experience is. It is
Mhm.
almost identical. It is amazing when you tell people that. They're like, I don't think so. It's like, no, no, it is. Most people are kind of shooting themselves in the foot, like the minute they release their job ad. They don't even realize that their job ad doesn't really even have any semblance of information about the company culture, about this is what the job is, this is what the job is not, this is what we're looking for. And I think a lot of that is companies right now, what I'm finding at least, is are having a hard time defining their own cultures.
Hmm.
They don't really know foundationally what their own cultures are. Maybe at one point in time they had a culture, a great company culture, and they knew what it was, but times change, people change, a lot of stuff goes on in the world which affects culture, different things, and cultures are meant to evolve to an
Hmm.
extent. If your values can stay the same, but your culture can evolve to become more inclusive, to become, different things, to become your biases can shift or they can go away. Because I think no matter how hard we try, we're human. We're always going to have some level of bias in there, which is why AI is so difficult to train with hiring models or screening models because of bias. It's incredibly difficult. Um, but I think that bias is not always the traditional method that we think it is with race or religion or, gender or there's a lot, it goes a lot deeper than that. And I think when we talk about culture, it's become sort of a buzzword.
Yeah, it does. I mean, I love when Deming in the 60s came up, was a quality, the ISO
Right,
9000, and just he brought quality, the word quality to manufacturing here in the United States. Well, after a
right.
while, the word
What does it
quality
mean?
lost its meaning. Well,
Yeah,
culture is in the same place now. Well,
yeah.
I've been on
What?
this journey because of the YouTube series that I have, Strategies for Tomorrow's Leaders.
Right.
I've been asking for about the last 5 years the people I've been interviewing to help me define culture. And at the end of the day, where I landed on this, it has to do with how the people, not the leader, how the people in an organization believe or think and how they act. That defines culture. So when you say that it evolves, the reason why it might shift, it has to do with the people in the organization and what the leaders allow to act. I mean, we in a company that we ran. I mean, that was a big challenge we had was finding people who fit our culture, right? But also we had to make sure that when we made decisions and somebody was acting against our premises, when our employees came up with this, I loved it. The name of our company was Steverson. We had Steverson
Okay.
Accounting Professional, Steverson Technology, but what was awesome is I was in a meeting one day, and one of our senior people said, "No, we can't do that." I said, "Why not?" Because that's not the Steverson way. And I went, "Ooh, I like that." Tell me what you mean by that. And they went through.
Yeah.
And so all of a sudden they started talking, what's the Steverson way? And it had to do with when you talk about the sale to the customer, when you're hiring, you have to treat the candidate like the customer. The reason for that is that we should treat our employees, the members of our team, as
Yes.
well, if not better,
Then the
than the
customer.
customers because
Yes.
they are the nerve center of our organization.
Right.
Everything our customer experiences is based upon our internal team. And so what happens is we
Absolutely.
have to constantly be asking ourselves, what message are we sending to our people? What message are we receiving from our people? How many times can
Right.
you service a client, right, and go, I don't care what you like or not. Here, I'm going to give you this. That's not
Right.
going to work.
No.
But the same thing goes with our team. The people that I like to point out, the people who choose to work for us, who
Right.
select us as their boss, the person that they're going to follow. And when you take that weight on your shoulders, it doesn't mean that I need to walk around and make their lives easy. And that's a mistake I think we see happening right now.
Yes.
We try to placate and there's a difference between being nice and being kind.
I agree.
Being nice means I'm nice. I want you to like me. Mike's a nice guy. Being kind sometimes means that I'm gonna have to give you a difficult message because
Well,
if I don't
yeah.
give you the difficult message, if I'm not giving you feedback, if I'm not bringing a difficult situation for us to try to resolve, we create what I refer to as false harmony. And what we have to do is we have to be able to have harmony, but harmony means we're going to create a safe place for people to have input, right? Figure out how do
Right.
we flesh that out and say, here's the direction we're going. And I think that
Right.
then in today's time, um, we have to, as leaders, we have to slow ourselves down as we're trying to race the speed of information to be able to create space for people to focus on those things that are most important. So I think that that's the key aspect of what we're talking about.
Right, and I agree. And I think it's with leadership and slowing down, and to your point, I think what we're also talking about is accountability,
Mm,
right? Accountability. I've seen this with teams myself and had this experience as a manager where I've, come in and I have a team that I'm running and I run it a certain way. And then I have to take over another person's team because they've either left or something like that. And that person's ran their team like they're friends. And I come in and I'm like, I'll be friendly to you. I'll be, but I'm at the end of the day, like I have to hold you accountable for
hmm
things. And there's an expectation that has to happen. And that's a hard thing for people when someone comes in and has to reset those expectations
Yes.
because
Yeah.
being they're not being enforced or they're not being correctly laid out in the first place. And then they've never been held accountable.
hmm
That's the worst. You can, if you're going to do, I think the worst injustice you can do to your team is to not hold them accountable.
Totally.
Because if those individuals ever want to go out into another company or go out into the workforce or in life in general, they will be held accountable for things. And
Mm.
if you don't have metrics or you don't have a system that supports the human side and the accountability side for like, this is the job performance, this is what the expectation is for you to do these things, you've agreed to do these things. I will be here to support you through them, but I'm also not going to support you in any BS at the same time. That's the kindest thing you can do to someone is hold them accountable.
Yeah.
And I think that gets lost sometimes in leadership because we don't want to upset people. But I would venture to take that further and say there is a misstep happening in leadership in general when it comes to internal work and looking at why would we not like what's holding us up from wanting to hold someone accountable
hmm
at work? Why are we wanting to be friends with someone versus be friendly to them at work, but still hold them accountable because that's ultimately the kindest thing. And I would venture to guess that there's something in there internally going on, but a lot of leadership today doesn't want to drop the ego, doesn't want to dig in to what's really going on underneath the surface and say, why do I make the decisions I make? Why do I manage the way that I manage? Why do I hire the way that I hire? Hiring managers get stuck in a rut of hiring the same way or the same types of people or writing the same job ads. My favorite is I can always tell when they're written with AI now because they just shove it into ChatGPT and say, write my job ad. I can always tell.
Sure.
And I'm like, they're doing such a disservice to not only the company, but the candidates that are applying for that job. Because I wouldn't apply for a job that I didn't know what it was.
hmm
But I think that we have to understand where our biases come from. We have to understand what makes us tick internally, and then we have to really kind of work through those things. Um, and also understand what our values are that drive the culture and then hire for those values, right?
Yeah. Yeah. What you're talking about is, I think, the most important time that a leader spends in their work day, work week, work year is on self-reflection. Right? It's being able to, we're in such a busy time period that when we don't create space to be able to just to reflect and look inward. A lot of stuff you talked about here, Emily, had to do with the fact of um, from when you ask why do leaders don't go to this place of self-reflection or self-awareness. uh, I look at that and I try to unpack those words, and all we're talking about has to do with is that most leaders that we deal with today are still human beings.
Oh yeah, of
You
course.
know,
Yeah. Yeah.
hopefully they're human beings, right?
Yeah.
And so because of that, since we're human beings, we are wired for self-preservation, wired for self-protection. And so what takes place is that we approach things from a place of what's comfortable to us,
Oh, of
And we
course.
move
Yeah.
away from what is uncomfortable. And that's where this word bias comes into play. Because bias is, let's look at what that word means. Bias is not ethnicity or that I am going to be prejudiced against the color of someone's skin. That
Yes.
is a form of bias.
Excuse me.
All right. But it's not the definition of bias.
Right.
That what bias is I'm going to have a predetermined thought process that I'm going to push away facts, figures, and information and be biased toward the outcome as opposed to going to a place of neutrality so I can pull information in and make sort of um, not unfiltered, but unweighted decisions.
A decision based on critical thinking,
Yeah.
on
And when it
facts.
comes into
Yeah.
play, and so because of that, when you think in terms of bias, I laughed. I mean, in Secrets for Hiring, right? And there's a section that we talk about like 10 different biases.
Right.
One of them I love was the horn bias.
Yes.
The horn bias is the one that, because of the fact that I look at somebody and, here in Texas, where I'm from, we have the UT and University of Texas and A&M in a rivalry. It's been going on for a long time.
Right.
And depending upon what school you went to, you may look at the other one and go, oh, they went there, horn, they went there.
Right.
Okay. Or in the interview process, as I'm talking to somebody, and somebody talks about the fact that they dropped out of school, like I did. Okay. Become a college dropout. Right. And they take that piece of information and it sits on top of everything. And what happens in my case is that we talk about Secret Farm. That's actually the third book that I've written. So if you look at the fact that I'm a college
Right.
dropout, that piece of information doesn't show my talent, my capability, and what the last 25, 30 years of experience has taught me.
Of course.
And so it narrows things down. Now, the halo bias is mine was that I worked in college as a cook in a French restaurant. My dad had a farm. And so I used to love when I was interviewing somebody if somebody grew up on a farm, I said, they have work ethic.
Oh, yeah.
Right? If they worked in a restaurant, they had a work ethic. I sold books door to door in the summertime. If they sold books and then
Or did door-to-door sales.
sales,
Yeah.
the door to door sales. Well, what happens is that's called the halo. That I
Right.
take something and I
Yeah.
push everything aside and say because of that, or the halo has to do with the fact of fraternity brother. I'm with them with you go to
Right.
school, you're in a fraternity, I put a halo around it. And so we have to look at those are filters that we put in that we use to process information in the selection process. And we got to make sure that if we're not using the problem that we're trying to resolve as a company, and then what we're capable of offering to someone to where not whenever they join us today, but where they could possibly be in 5 years, put that filter in and use that from a decision-making process, and then open the door up to have multiple people having their perspective of what our needs are and the working relationship, and be able to pull that information together as you're making decisions.
Right.
That's how you crack, the bias. It has to do with what's our self-awareness on that subject.
Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah. And it's very difficult to do. Very difficult to do. I, especially when we're dealing with the biases related to, well, relating to other people. Like
Hmm.
the example you gave of the halo. I think that's the hardest one for most people to
Yeah.
overcome because we genuinely want to find other people that we relate to,
Hmm.
that we have commonality with. Again, part of values and culture and all of that. And so we tend to gravitate to people we have things in common with. But I know this as well as the next person that just because you might have been an amazing door-to-door salesperson with an amazing work ethic doesn't mean that person number, two is not, have that same work ethic.
That's correct. That's
And
just the
so that's,
label.
yeah, it's a tough thing to get over because we desperately as humans we're animals of connection. We want to connect with each other. We tend to group together. Um by interest and by things
Hmm.
that we have in common. And so I think that's a great point to kind of go into AI with this, right? And I think for me, being someone that studies AI and really tries to spend a lot of time with generative AI and now agentic AI and trying to look at this and some of the situations that have happened with recruiting and AI bias, because there's been some pretty large situations that have happened recently with some companies. But that's probably the hardest thing the AI has to overcome is bias. And it's
Hmm.
because of the fact that humans we're so unique that it is almost impossible for us as humans, because we program the technology, to not program some form of bias into it. It is almost impossible because we would literally have to be, what my opinion is, we'd have to be asking every imaginable question to try to get the bias out. But then we would also have to be giving it to other people that don't share anything in common with us. And they would have to be looking at these things as well. And then we would have to do rigorous testing on it, right? It would have to be
Hmm.
tested against groups of people to make sure that we're not flagging out a group of ages 40 to 50 years old,
Hmm.
or everybody that it assumes is African American because of the type of name they have, or different things like that. Um, but these are things that are very difficult to train out of it because we are humans programming the technology.
Yeah, but maybe,
And
but is the answer on this, Emily, maybe, um,
some things shouldn't be automated.
yeah, well, but what you're doing, but the beauty of AI is it allows me to process gazillion bytes of information
Yeah,
in nanoseconds. I mean, it's
yeah,
just the stuff we have at our fingertips. And so what happens is if we try to build something in to take on every single variable that might come into play, what
right,
happens is we're doing the exact opposite. We're
yeah,
putting too much information on the table.
right,
And the reality is that maybe what we're talking about here in the hiring process is that how do we make sure we're building not focus, I call it hyper focus. What are the key aspects of what we're looking for in the role, in the talent, in the culture? What are the key, not
right,
all, what are the key? And then build out a selection process that goes in where we quantify before we start the process. Here are the things we're looking for. And now let's figure out how do we identify. In other words, if we're looking for
right,
resilience, all right,
yeah,
we don't make up, the fact that I sold books door to door in the summertime that I have
right,
resilience, right? I have to go and what are examples of resilience? It's like we interviewed somebody who that and hired her.
right.
Unfortunately, she was great. She was just, I mean, one of the most
Interviewed beautifully.
just
Yeah,
endearing personalities. Just and she came in and the reason we wanted her is because in college she was working with the sorority that had the highest fundraising in the history of the college.
oh wow,
It was
yeah,
amazing. And so, oh my
yeah,
gosh, we need to bring her in.
yeah,
We put her at a desk and put her in a role as a recruiter, and she didn't have any ability to do any outreach. She could process, but she couldn't do any outreach. And I'm going, but she did this. Well, the mistake we made in the interviewing process is she kept talking about all the things that they
they
did,
did.
not what she did. And we
Gotcha.
found out she was the record keeper on the team,
So she
not
knew
the
the
prospector.
process, but not the actual,
She didn't do. She
she
didn't
wasn't
put
the doer.
herself out in the front. She
Yeah,
was a good catcher,
right,
not a pitcher.
right.
Example. And so
Yep,
what happens is that we so you have to, if you're looking for that, you have to have a way of quantifying what's the resilience factor
you're
from
right,
a communication skills. What are we looking for with somebody? Somebody talks about behavioral style, interviewing where
right,
somebody's exhibited a behavior before.
right.
Kelly Webb, who's a chief human resources officer for Synacor, a company I've done a lot of work with over the years. I mean, she's, in my opinion, probably one of the top CHROs we have in Houston. Amazing mindset. She and
Yeah.
I were talking about how she helped move their company from 80 employees to almost 600 now in her tenure with the organization. And
Wow.
she goes, the major shift they did is she moved beyond behavioral style interviewing and went to motivational style interviewing. The question was, what was the motivation behind the behavior? How do I
Right.
how do I ferret that out? And so what that means is the interviews can't be simply do I like the person. It can't be. I had a client of mine early in my career that used to intimidate the heck out of people in the interview. He put them through, they called it a negative interview to see if they had the resilience to pop them way through because they're public accounting and the challenge is he wasn't seeing the person in real time.
He was seeing how they would react
Possibly or
under
not
the
react because
or yeah, or not react under
yeah.
pressure.
That's it. And so
Yeah.
it's and I've looked over a period of time is do you create a place where there's tension to see can they mentally do this, but you have to have something that where can they be safe so somebody can be open to sharing and open to having their mind engage. And so it's when we're going through the selection process, you know, the second level is the so you have your behavioral motivational type of interviews.
Right.
The second level, which I think is important, is to have a rubric mentality.
I agree.
And I just
Yep.
finished a project, a consulting project with a company was hiring a CEO, a new CEO to come in, and it was a public arena, and so there was a certain amount of skill set that they needed to come in and be able to turn some things around based upon some stuff that was going on. And
Sure.
so, but there were a lot of things that were needed, but what helped with the selection process that we built out of rubric, which is a weighting system that says, here are the five things that are most important. And
Yep.
based upon these five things, this one has the highest weight so that I don't get caught up in somebody's gregarious prospecting outside sales skills whenever
Right.
I need somebody who can come in and design marketing campaigns because that's more important than this.
Right.
And then we universally come to an agreement. So now when we're discussing this, we go to that as opposed to the bias of fraternity brother, you know, sorority sister, you know,
Yep.
type of mentality. So the
Yeah.
rubric mentality, I think is really important aspect of when you're trying to decide who we're going to invite to be part of our organization.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think I agree with you. I think that's a great tip for hiring managers. The rubric mentality is excellent. And what I wanted to go back to though on the AI side of it with, you know, the guardrails is the only thing I would say with like giving it specific parameters just on a technical side of this is that um with the I guess what I'm saying with it is it would be incredibly difficult to factor in just because of the way I guess for pre-screening processes is where I'm getting at with this. Because to be able to say on like if I'm for example a hiring manager, I'm using an ATS, right? And I get
Hmm.
500 applicants for an SDR position, let's say. Where a lot of companies are using AI right now is on the pre-screening side.
Correct.
And so what happens is you don't have human eyes on these candidates, which I understand. I've been doing recruiting a million years and I understand what it's like to try to get through 500 applicants. It is not easy. You don't want to ghost people. You don't want to not respond, even if it's to say, I'm sorry, we've moved on in the hiring process. Like, I get it. It's hard. But when it comes to pre-screening in those scenarios, it's incredibly difficult to say, okay, I want to put parameters to say I want resilience in this person
Correct.
because you can't really do that on a resume. Like you have to do that once you get to the interview level, right?
Yeah, that's a character. That's a
Yeah,
character
it's a
trait.
character trait.
That's you can't
You
automate.
can't gauge that in an in a resume. So where I'm saying the pre-screening side of things is where I'm seeing AI have a lot of technical issues because you've got like nuances in different languages. I
Hmm.
mean, I know this very well. There's some phrases in Hebrew where if you say them wrong, you've said something very different. This could be in any language, right? This could be in
That's right.
Italian, this could be in French, this could be, I mean, any language you can say something wrong and it's a wrong word, right? And then you're like, "Oh, that didn't mean what it meant to mean." But that's similar in language. Language is a sexy thing in AI because it's hard to get right. Um,
Hmm.
and then, you know, so I guess what I'm saying is for AI, we have to be careful of the tech because the tech can have the biases because it's created by a human.
Hmm.
you know? And so to the point I think we're making here is we have to get better at surfacing what we want in candidates at the beginning when it
Mm-hmm.
comes to the job ad, when it comes to the description, when it comes to knowing, we have to sit down with our hiring manager or the manager that's going to be managing this person. And we have to say, what are we looking for really?
Mm-hmm.
Let's take our top people in this department that we love. If we could clone Mike, or we could clone Emily, or we could clone, John over here, what characteristics of Mike do we want? Like, does Mike have that we love, that we would love to see in another candidate? What are these, capabilities that this person should have? And you can take kind of from those aspects and attributes, and then you can put some of that stuff into a job description,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Right. And because I think
Now,
what you're talking about, Emily, that's I think important. It's a message that I'm I'm the town crier on, is
me
that
too.
you have a job description, and then you have a an ad,
Hmm.
some type of posting. Okay, a posting is not a job description.
Right.
What happens is the purpose of the outreach on your website or whatever you're putting out in the marketplace, right, is a magnet.
Yes.
And so with what you're describing is if you're looking at this is what we're looking for. Now the what I find people miss out on is then go, what would be attractive to somebody like that? Now let's write our posting on that as opposed to saying I need somebody who's got this, capable of this, can do this,
1000%.
to be able to push it in that direction. You can have some information in there that as call them qualifiers, if you will.
Yes.
Okay. But the key part of it is in today's time is what can I do to take my job posting and use it to being a magnet to attract attention? Because if you don't do that, it's what you end up having is in today's time. All right, I had to grab my phone real quick because in today's time, what you have is that this mentality. They're looking. This is what they're doing.
Yep.
And so what happens is, how do you get their attention? You get their attention in the first 5 or 6 sentences.
Yep.
So you
That's
have to be
correct.
able to put this is, and I've audited my clients' postings uh,
Yeah.
for that purpose to look at this. And when you spin it in that direction, it changes the type of response that you get.
Yep. I agree. Yeah, absolutely. And it's again, it's like it's marketing. It's
Hmm.
marketing. It's
Yeah,
recruitment marketing. It's a
yeah,
different mentality. And then of course, you can get into things like nurturing your talent pool that a lot of people forget. They have a talent pool of people probably sitting in their ATS or sitting in their, I don't know, however you're tracking your candidates. I have some clients that are still on Excel spreadsheets, which is really always fun. So, they track that way and, but you have probably hundreds of people in your talent pool that you want to keep warm in
yeah.
some way.
Because yeah, what you're talking about is that I love this is thinking about a talent attraction is not a today thing; it's a day and tomorrow. And so
Yep,
what happens is,
yep,
do I have something within my ATS that I can track somebody so that I can be pushing information out to them so I can stay front of mind
yes,
of what's taking place so that if there's some new project that's come up,
right,
that I need to let that particular pool of people know, hey,
yes,
we've got this new situation that's coming. Here's what we're involved with, whatever. It's being able to use AI. And that's the thing. We have the AI today gives us the ability to manage our internal
yes.
databases.
That's where AI will come in to this being a game changer for recruiting, in my opinion.
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah, very
Yep.
much so. Very much so. Because what happens is, you were talking about something earlier that what popped in my mind is that the challenge we run into, I know that I run into is, am I being efficient or am I being effective?
Yes. I
AI
ask that question all the time.
AI started me off with this thing. Look how efficient this. Look how efficient it is. But there's certain things that while it might make me efficient, it's not going to make me effective. And
Right.
when we pull the human processing. I call it the human reticular activator. That part of our
Right.
brain that says this is important to me. That's a little part of our processing. It's called the reticular activator. It's like when I
Right.
bought my daughter her first car. It's like we bought her a Hyundai Elantra, a silver Hyundai Elantra,
Love it.
and it's like as we spent all day. It's the last car we saw all day long.
Yeah.
As I drove to work on Monday morning after buying a car for on Saturday, there must have been a sale on silver Hyundai Elantras over the weekend because I'm driving down Interstate 10 in Houston, Texas, one of the busiest highways in the United States, and
Right.
I'm in a sea of Hyundai Elantras for some reason. Okay. Well, what happened was all of a sudden my reticular activator, I'm noticing them
You're
now.
noticing it now. Yeah.
So that's when you're talking about talent selection, putting somebody through your filter, you're trying to get that reticular activator working,
Right.
in a way that you can say, these are the things that are important. These are the things that we know that will work well for us with an organization. These are the things that are, and you and I were talking earlier, there's two things is we need to make sure that we're hiring people that fit our culture, right?
Yes.
Right. The mistake that we make is we don't put enough weight on looking at hiring people that our culture fits them.
Yeah. It should be an all size fits one type of scenario, but both
Well, it's not. I
directions,
mean, what
right? But
happens
it's
is
not.
that, if they, it's, they might fit our culture, but the question is, can I quantify? Do I know why our culture fits them?
Right.
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 And because when you're using that, that also becomes the magnet as you communicate with them, as you vet, as you take them through the process. And also when you're looking at that, it's just an extra layer of you questioning of whether or not this is somebody that should be part of the organization.
Well, ultimately, I mean, why would you want to hire somebody that the culture doesn't fit them because they're going to turn over because they're not going to be happy there anyway.
Yeah.
So then you're costing yourself money down the line because you're going to have to, I mean, we know how much money it costs organizations to hire wrong. So
Mhm.
it's astronomical. But I want to talk about this gem because I'm very excited that you released this. It actually came out this week, right? You
Two
ordered
weeks
a
ago.
copy.
About two
Yeah,
weeks.
yeah,
Yeah.
2 weeks ago.
Yep. That's right.
This book is fantastic and it was a great read. It's very easy to digest, which I love. It's broken out into really meaningful chapters, but it's broken out into chunks, which I like because you can read like a chapter or two and not feel like you're overwhelmed by the information in it. So who'd you write it for and why?
I
What was
wrote it
the,
for I wrote it, I didn't write it for the HR community, right, the recruiters of the world.
yeah,
And the reason for that is that we go through the interview process and our muscles can be honed pretty well. I
right.
wrote it for the manager who doesn't go through the interview process a lot, so that they can kind of get a roadmap of
Yeah,
in selection. These are the things, this is a process to go through so that for me, I mean, when I started in the business in the recruiting at 21 years old. And I didn't have experience and there was no training. I didn't go to recruiting school. I didn't go to
yeah,
interviewing school. And so nobody said, Mike, this is how you interview. And so what happened was I find that a lot of people, you know, look at things that they've heard, or they try to figure things out. I wrote this thing specifically after talking to a lot of recruiters. What would you like your clients to do? That if they did that, they would increase their efficiency and
hmm,
effectiveness in selecting right. And so that's why we put things in there that talks about, or what you said earlier. So let's get our game plan put together. The section in there, here are the interviewing questions to ask and move away from the ones, what are your strengths? What are your weaknesses?
yeah,
Which are, and I put, when I started in the business, I don't know why the questions used to ask these really ridiculous things like if you were an animal, what animal would you be? If you were a
like
tree, what kind of tree would you be?
what does that tell you about a person? Like, who
They're
cares? I do throw one question in at the end just to screw with them, but it's like, give me five like alternative uses for a stapler that's not its intended purpose, just to see. I just do that just to mess with them. But most of the time. But yeah, there used to be really dumb.
there's something along those lines. And so
Yeah,
what happens is right now you're trying to get people so we put some questions in there so you can say, how does a person think?
yeah,
What are and to be able to walk through a process and be able to really look at questions that look at if you're hiring an accountant, what are some
right.
how do you approach that? If you're hiring a customer service person, what are some so we built some specific techniques that will help somebody who just wants to sharpen the most important muscle that you need to have as a leader,
Yeah.
which is inviting people to be a part of your team.
Yep. The invitation.
Mm-hmm.
The invitation.
That's the interviewing process. It's the
Yeah.
selection process.
Yeah. I agree. Well, this is great. I have really enjoyed speaking with you. I want to ask one final question, and I
You're not going to
usually
ask me
ask
that
this.
stapler thing, are you? Because I don't know if I can handle
No,
that.
no,
But
no, no. I mean, I could if you want me to, but um, I asked this of a lot of our guests. When you wrote this book, what did you learn about yourself writing this book?
wow, that's an interesting question. Um, I think the main thing, the first thing that pops up into my mind is what I learned about me is that when I slow myself down uh, and focus on what am I trying to communicate, when I can attack the busyness, excuse me, the blurriness of busyness, that my creativity jumps drastically. That if I stay hung in the blurriness of busyness because of all the things that I need to do.
Right.
So because of that, it's can I make spending the creative time just as important as the sales call? That I go to a higher level of creativity. And I found that what I learned about myself is I have a tendency to get hung in the blurriness of busyness, and I don't allow the creative muscle to have as much space as I'd like for it to have. And that's why I'm actually already, this just hit the stands today. I mean,
Yeah,
this month, somewhere around here, I've got a picture of the next book that's coming out next year called Move the Ball. And I've already
love
started
it.
that process
That's
because,
great.
because of what I learned by going through this is like, you know, make that a high priority, create space for that. And what happens is your effectiveness goes up.
It's very true. I love that, especially in the day of AI. I think making space is important, and you know, we can when we quiet ourselves is when we kind of allow our mind to be open to just free flow. And I think that's an incredible answer. And obviously, it's been an incredible experience because you're on to the next, right? And that's what this is about is giving back, and also what does it mean for myself, right? Because you're ultimately giving back to yourself in doing this process, which is incredibly important. So again, Mike, thank you so much. Mike Lejeune, thank you for being here. Again, the book is Secrets for Hiring Right. It just came out. It's fantastic. Recommend that hiring managers read this for sure, because it really breaks down very simple steps and framework for hiring. You can also reach Mike on his website at lightingthepath.com, right?
.net.
.net, sorry, lightingthepath.net. And then also on LinkedIn, you
Mhm.
can find Mike. And then the book is available on Amazon. And yeah, we're super excited, and I would love to potentially have you back to talk
Oh, it's been
about.
on. This is
Yeah,
fun. I
I
enjoyed the
would
heck
love
out of
to.
this.
I would love to have you back to talk about, how the book is doing, and then obviously we'll have you back to talk about more hiring, because I think we're going to go into a very interesting time in this country with unemployment going up, and I most of the people that we talk to about hiring, right, they need this help, especially in today's world with this changing. And so this has been an honor having you on, and I'm very happy to that you've released the book, and congratulations.
Yeah, let's end up with an atmosphere of hope for the people who are listening in.
Absolutely. Yes.
While yes, we are seeing unemployment uptick a little bit.
Yeah.
I'm not a very good soothsayer. I'm not Elon Musk. I can't tell you what tomorrow is going to be like.
Right.
I will tell you, I will report in that especially for those who are technology, um, and when I say that, I'm talking about somebody who is is elevating their talent, their skill, their technical knowledge. And that could be a diesel mechanic. I mean, I'm not
Yeah.
talking about an IT,
Yeah.
expert. That the demand for talent is going to increase, not decrease, because
Right.
of demographics.
Yes.
We have a higher, the boomer generation is moving out of the workforce. You had a smaller group of people that are coming in. And so because of that is they're projecting within the next 10 years for us to have a more difficult time finding talent than we did pre-COVID.
Oh, I agree.
That's
Yeah.
what's in front of us.
Yes.
So what we need to be doing is sharpening our skills
Yes.
so the demand for our knowledge increases. And when we do that, um, career stability is in your hands,
Yeah.
not in someone else's.
Yeah, and that gives me a good idea. We'll talk about a next episode. That gives me a good idea for a next episode. But I think you're right. Skills-based volunteering
Yeah.
in volunteerism in companies is the number one thing that keeps people at companies, believe it or not, keeps them
Hmm.
happy at work. So that would be a good topic for us to get into is those skills-driven missions in companies, right? What keeps people retained at companies? Um, but yeah, there's a ton of stuff, and you're right, skills, right? Go out and one of the cool things about technology now is it affords us the opportunity to be a little bit more autonomous in how we get these skills, which is kind of cool.
Hmm.
So we can go now, and if you learn how to use generative AI and these different things, you can actually learn these things on your own, which is pretty cool. Um, and learn some of these skills without having to maybe go sit in a classroom or do, different things like we used to have to absorb
Yeah.
information. So,
Yeah. It's a
Mike,
huge thing.
yeah, yeah, it's been a pleasure. Thank you so much. And we'll look forward to having you on the next time.
Super. Same with this. And thanks for the opportunity.
Yeah, of course. Well, have a great rest of your day.
Thanks.
Okay, that conversation between Emily and Mike just completely shifted how I think about hiring, and I'm still processing these game-changing insights. First, that Versace Pegasus story is everything. We're not looking for a perfect pedigree, we're looking for someone who lives up to their potential. Mike's right. You can hire someone from Park Avenue or a park bench and find genius in both places. Seconda's definition of culture hit me hard. It's not what the leader wants, it's how the people actually think, believe, and act. That's why you can't just wish culture into existence, you have to protect and build it through every single hiring decision. And third, that rubric methodology is brilliant. When Mike helped hire that CEO, they weighted the 5 most important things so bias couldn't creep in. No more fraternity brother hiring or getting distracted by someone's charm when you need analytical skills. Here's my challenge. What unconscious biases are driving your hiring decisions right now? Are you chasing the perfect candidate that doesn't exist? Or are you building magnets that attract people who will actually thrive in your culture? Huge thanks to Mike Lejeune for sharing his expertise grab Secrets for Hiring Right on Amazon. It just dropped and it's fantastic. Check out Lighting Thepath, Net, and connect with him on LinkedIn. When we stop chasing mythical perfect candidates and start building better magnets for authentic talent, that's when everything changes. If this conversation sparks something for you, hit subscribe and share this with someone who's struggling with hiring. Sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is admit that your process needs work. I'm Ryan Kohler, and I'll catch you next time on Talent Talks.